Welcome back. Now, January marked the back-to-school period, while February sees the return of many university students. Worryingly, unpaid fees to universities has run into billions of rands, and this will see thousands of graduates not receiving their certificates. And as we continue to observe National Debt Awareness Month, Thabo Hollo, Senior Program Manager for Financial Education at Old Mutual, joins us to discuss how to tackle student debt. Thabo, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Now, the student debt crisis is highlighted every time around this year, and of course this is as students return to varsity. Before we interrogate the debt crisis in particular, are we perhaps, or rather, should we rather see universities and the Department of Higher Education maybe doing a bit more to address this issue as it happens every year?
That will be an ideal situation, and thank you for the opportunity. Ideally, you'd want some sort of a partnership, collaboration between universities, between parents, private institutions, and certainly government taking place so that we alleviate this challenge. It's a yearly challenge. Each time around this year, everybody gets distressed, the parents, especially the people that are mostly affected, which are the students. So yes, ideally we'd want to see a collaboration with all role players. Especially
because most times lack of funding or not having funding is usually, a result of socioeconomic issues.
Certainly. And you can't divorce, unfortunately, the situation of student funding from general pressure that we feel in South Africa as consumers, right? So yes, there's socioeconomic challenges right at the bottom end of the income spectrum, but we're also seeing challenges in the middle market, right? The middle sector of the economy is also under tremendous pressure. So that puts pressure not just in terms of the ability to afford day-to-day living, but most especially education. And we know that the cost of education is not necessarily cheap in South Africa.
Let's look at maybe some of the other initiatives that we've been seeing when it comes to funding. Loans should be the last resort, right?
Absolutely, and what we need to look at instead is just a mix of what are the available fund. For instance, you still have funding from government, whether it's ISFAP or NSFAS. You have universities themselves that are offering scholarships, bursaries. You have private companies that are also in that mix. So you need to go through the entire spectrum, and perhaps everything else failing, then we can look at debt, student loans in particular.
Talking about student loans, right? I can imagine that the people that are taking out the loans are mostly people in that middle class range, considering that, they are, they don't qualify for NAFSAs, but they still don't afford the university fees.
Classical missing middle. So you too rich for social grants, but you're too poor to unfortunately afford education. Yes, the bulk of the people that we're seeing in that space are that particular middle class that is already stretched, and unfortunately, and particularly because at least they are somewhat employed or in one way or the other, and that will be the requirement if you were to go the loan route. They are able to provide collateral in one shape or the other, or stand as surety for any other loan. So yes, typically that will be the market that will be targeted for student loans. But as we know, we are already stretched in that particular market already.
So here we are, right? We have a student that has perhaps their parents have taken out a loan on their behalf, or the student themselves taking out a loan to fund their fees. What are some of the mistakes, that students make when taking out debt, and how can this be avoided?
I think the biggest mistake generally applies across all consumers. Sign here without reading. That is the biggest one. That's the first one. Read what you sign, right? Know what are the terms and conditions. Know exactly what you're getting yourself into. But most importantly, allow yourself to shop around, right? There's nothing that stops you from going to from person A to person B and comparing and say, what are the terms, and look for favorable terms, whether it's in a form of repayment, whether it's the form of the cost of debt itself. The ideal thing is do comparison. Compare what you can get from the private sector, what you can get, for instance, alternative forms of fundraising, crowdfunding. If there's anything like that you can access, rather compare all available avenues before you commit into a student loan.
And I think really the big issue here is just around the knowledge bit, knowing that you do have other options before actually taking out a loan. Talk to me about some of the strategies that can be used to whittle debt faster. I can imagine when you're now a young professional working, you'd want to get through that and pay that off as fast as possible.
That is the ideal thing.
Yeah.
The ideal thing is, firstly, you should only take the debt that you can afford, right? And I oftentimes say this: it's not a target, right? When somebody tells you that you qualify for R500,000 rands worth of debt, it doesn't mean you absolutely have to take R500,000 rands worth of debt. Take only the debt that you can afford. If you're taking debt just for study, cover your tuition, cover your books, and maybe your living allowance, etc., etc. But you don't overextend yourself. And now that you're out of it, the ideal thing is to get out as soon as possible. So make those arrangements. Go to the lender and say, hey, how much do I owe you? Do I owe you? And make the arrangement and stick to the arrangement. Pay off whatever you can pay off. The strategies, of course, of paying off. You can either, depending on how many loans you have out there, target the smaller one and clear the smaller ones before you go into the bigger ones. Or alternatively, you can say which ones are most expensive. Either way, there is no wrong or right. Personally, you would say, hey, I can afford more. Perhaps let me clear the ones that's most expensive and clear off as quickly as possible. But for your psychology, maybe you want to clear the smaller ones, right? That would say, gives you a boost that says, hey, I'm paying off something. Then you can rechannel those funds into the bigger amount. But the ideal thing is make those arrangements, repay as quickly as you possibly can, and stick to your budgeting.
Are there any trends that you have been seeing with, the period where we had high interest rates and now that interest rates are falling?
There's no specific, pressure is still there.
Okay.
So there's no specific trends that are significant enough to talk about. We're still seeing a whole lot of kids that are coming out of the middle and the lower class, coming into universities, into those spaces. So as a result, that pressure is still there. So yes, the ideal thing is to see a slowdown in terms of lending, but the needs are still there. The need for education is still there. The need for businesses is still there. So you still have quite a bit of consumer credit consumption, unfortunately.
I want to talk about maybe reframing and shifting our mindsets as well when it comes to debt. We touched on those socio-economic challenges and, maybe someone that is a student graduating, now focusing on paying debt. But, in an internship program, for example, you're perhaps not getting paid more than 10,000 rand. You're supporting a family. You are, paying for transport, paying for rent. How do we balance that?
Let's get back to the basics, right? Let's get back to the basics of, for instance, the issue around savings is a mental more than a physical thing, right? It's not just the ability to afford savings. It's the willingness to actually save. It's not how big the amount you need to save. It's your ability to say, I will start small and I will build into that. So, and that principle applies into debt, right? Where you go in, instead of rushing through the whole thing and trying to swallow everything at the same time, you might want to say, hey, let me get my life balanced. You still need risk products, right? You still need to be insured.
Yeah.
You still need savings. You still need to live, right? You need your day-to-day allowances. At the same time, you need to repay your loans. So the idea is get the balance right. Draw up your budget and say, what are the things that I need and I need immediately, that I need to take care of now? What are the things that I can defer? What are the things that I need to save for? It's amazing that we get shocked that there will be Black Friday. It's amazing that we get shocked that there will be festive. We know that the 24th of December will be here. But come the 5th of January and the school fees time, we all act surprised, like, I didn't know that I have an 8-year-old. The truth of the matter is, these are the things that we can avoid, right? If we balance our life, if we get our life from the onset, live within your means, right? Don't compete with the Joneses. We don't know what the Joneses are up to. Stick to your lane, right? And draw up that budget, stick to that budget. Whether you're a young professional, you are already at work, or you're planning to go in there. It's not just a matter of small money. It's just the mentality behind and the psychology behind the usage of money. If we don't control the money, money will control us, unfortunately.
Thabo, thanks so much for joining us and just sharing those insights. That was Thabo Hollo, Senior Program Manager for Financial Education at Old Mutual.